This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
I am Mike Galligan with the law offices of Galligan and Newman in McMinnville, Tennessee. I support WCTE, the Upper Cumberland's own PBS station, because I believe it is important to create entertaining TV programs that also promote lifelong learning and understanding. When I support WCTE, I know that I am helping our Upper Cumberland community for generations to come.
The law offices of Galligan and Newman provide clients with large firm expertise and small firm personalized care and service.
I'm Avery Hutchins, your host for Where Stories Live. In this episode, we explore Falcon Rest Mansions Gardens, a Queen Anne-style home built around 1896 in McMinnville, Tennessee. The original owner was Clay Faulkner, son of Asa Faulkner, one of Tennessee's wealthiest industrialists at the time. The Faulkner family was so extensive that Clay had numerous relatives located all over the McMinnville community, including Charles Faulkner Bryant, after whom the Bryan Fine Arts Building at Tennessee Tech is named. Clay wanted to be closer to work, as the 2.5-mile buggy ride from town was causing him much discomfort. However, Clay's wife, Mary Clay Faulkner, had no desire to move. Clay promised her he'd build her the finest mansion around if she agreed to move to the 144-acre tract just south of Faulkner Mountain City Woolen Mill. And she agreed, and in 1897, Mrs. Faulkner and their 5 children moved into the beautiful home. Charlien McGlothin, the current co-owner and general manager of Falcon Rest, walks us through the history of the Faulkner family and how they impacted the community.
In 1900, there were 2,000 people in McMinnville, and I think it was a fairly prosperous town. The railroad connected it to Manchester, therefore Tullahoma and Nashville and Chattanooga. There was a lot of manufacturing, a great deal of water-driven mills were here. There were more plants to grow native here than anywhere in the United States or Europe, and started the nursery business. So McMinnville became known as the nursery capital of the world, and they had a lot of peach orchards. I think peach brandy was a popular product in the early 1900s. Clay's father, Asa Faulkner, was the first major industrialist in McMinnville and one of the richest men in the state, and he owned thousands of acres in this area. Clay and his brother started a mill across the road in 1873. They eventually split up. The other brother took over the mill that Clay's daddy had originally established, and when he died in 1889, his wife inherited the property on this side of the road, bought 144 acres from her for his mansion. He'd gotten tired of the buggy ride from town, so he told her if she'd move out here to be closer to the mill, he'd build her the grandest mansion in Tennessee. In 1902, there was a huge flood. And when Clay was cleaning up, he discovered a manganese spring, which was curative mineral water. So eventually he closed the mill and opened the Faulkner Springs Hotel in 1906 that he said was an ideal health and pleasure resort. Clay almost died of a kidney ailment. That was one of the reasons he got tired of the buggy ride. Somebody told him he had curative mineral water across the road by the mill. So he started drinking it, and he got so much better, he was able to get $35,000 worth of life insurance. So he started barreling it up, selling it all over the country under the label of Faulkner Mineral Water. After the flood, he also had the manganese spring, so with the 2 curative waters. This area was mainly Confederate sympathizers during the Civil War, but Asa Faulkner, Clay's father, was a Union sympathizer. He owned a few slaves, but he was against secession. But when the war started, Clay was 16, so Dad shipped him off to a military academy in New York to get him away from the Confederate draft. By the time Clay was 18 in 1863, both sides had mandatory draft laws. It looked like the Union was going to win. So he enlisted as a private. He mustered out in 1865 as a private, and I think he stayed as far away from things as he could. Mrs. Faulkner was known as Mary Clay Faulkner. A Goodspeed described her as a very cultured lady. She grew up in Carthage. She was 26 when they got married in 1873. But they did have 5 children over a range of years, about 11 years apart altogether. She was very active with Christian Endeavorers, which was a youth organization for the Methodist Church. And some of the families said they thought she was sort of shy. I think Mary had a formal relationship with her children. She never allowed her children to come into the bedroom. She would meet them in the morning room for a devotional before breakfast. They loved her, and after Clay died, she moved to Nashville, next to where the governor's mansion was, and Thula and Herschel moved with her, even though he was already 41 by then. So the family stuck together. Herschel was their second oldest. He was 19 when they moved in. The grandchildren said he was lovable but lazy with a capital L. One time he was asleep on the lake bank by the hotel, and he had molasses on his feet. Somebody woke him up and said, "Herschel, why do you have molasses on your feet?" He said, "To keep the flies away from my head." Nobody said he was stupid, just lazy, though. He invented an oil burner for a stove and patented it and lived the rest of his life off the proceeds of the patent. Herschel and Thula never got married, so that's why they moved to Nashville with Mary. Daisy was their middle daughter. She was 16. She was a gifted artist. We have several of her drawings and paintings in the mansion. Virginia was their youngest daughter. She was 10, very beautiful woman, and the only one who actually stayed here in McMinnville. So when Mary moved to Nashville, Virginia inherited most of the furniture that she didn't take with her. Thula was a gifted pianist. She also was famous in the family for painting everything she could get her hands on with gold leaf paint. The picture that George was talking about upstairs of the birthday party where they had the instruments the girls were playing, they were not real instruments. They were fake instruments that they were posing for Dad Lively to take their picture. One of Daisy's granddaughters was here a while back, and she said, "I love to see pictures of my grandmother like that," because she was always cutting up doing something. They were very active in their church. Clay was chairman of the building committee for First Methodist Church downtown. He was also Sunday school superintendent for several years. They even sponsored a big Christian Endeavor convention for the state that they had out here in the hotel while they still lived here. Clay had the mill across the road. He had the Great Falls Cotton Mill out at Rock Island Park. And he had 144 acres to manage here. So I imagine he spent most of his time working. Mary was a homemaker, but she did not cook. She did not have a key to the kitchen door. The cook had the only key to the kitchen door, so she did needlework. I kind of think she might have been a little bit shy because they said she was always the last one to arrive at church, and she would leave before the final hymn was over. They actually had a room upstairs for the governess, which did not have an entrance into the main mansion. You had to enter from the back veranda. Their carriage driver was named Mr. Webb, and their foreman was Mr. Garman. These were people who were good, solid Christian people who were successful financially, but he worked for a living. His father was very wealthy. He had 19 children, so that money was divided out. Clay earned his money.
Clay Faulkner died in 1916. Mary and the remaining family members moved to Nashville, and she sold the house to a local contractor named George Beach 3 years later. The mansion passed through the hands of various owners, including a doctor who would welcome and treat patients. The current owner, George McGlothin, bought it at auction in 1989. However, it probably would have helped if George had told his wife, Charlene, before buying the house. Let's see what happens after he wins the bid.
In the 1930s, Dr. Reynolds bought the mansion. He was a combination pharmacist, doctor. They said he sounded like a gruff old farmer. And someone said that he would get pills in barrels and sort them on the veranda as different placebos. Don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they were told. In the 1940s, it converted to a nursing home. By the 50s, it was one of the first full-scale hospitals in the whole area, the second one probably. And it stayed open until 1968. When Medicare came in, the doctor said, we're just going to shut the doors and leave everything the way it was because they're not going to tell me how to run my hospital. My husband's sister was born here. And when the doctor shut it, he boarded it up. Then he had somebody come in and try to tear it down because he couldn't sell it. That was why it was such a mess when we got it. He had converted it into a hospital, green hospital, and added on and divided rooms and made a mess of it. So I owe Dr. Dietrich a lot. He saved my husband's life when he was 9. So I have a husband and a daughter to show for that. And he messed up this building so much that when my husband showed up at the auction, nobody else wanted it. We lived in Fayetteville, but McMinnville had really started to prosper. A lot of industry was coming in. So he came to visit his parents down the road, said he was looking for rental property. His mother said, do you know the old hospital is up for auction? And his daddy said, don't tell him that, he might go buy it. We had already restored 2 old houses. So he came and looked and he got his curiosity up and he showed up at the auction.
And I bought this place without my wife ever having seen it. And I tell all men, don't ever do what I did. We lived in Fayetteville, Tennessee, which is about 80 miles away. I brought my wife on Easter Sunday on the way to church. I took her the worst part and I said, honey, what do you think of it? She pointed the worst part and she said, you put a mortgage on my house for this? Immediately I knew I was in trouble. We went to church and she repented, and the rest is history. People ask me, where in the world did you get all these furnishings? Well, about 43 years ago, my wife came to me, said, let's have a 2-day yard sale. I was really with it. I said, what's that? She explained to me what a yard sale was. I said, nobody's going to come. Famous last words. Everybody in the community showed up. I got in the spirit of it. And over the next 2 days, I sold all the furniture we have at that house. And I started buying what you see inside this very home. So it's a very understanding woman who this month has tolerated me 54 years. Miracles do happen. I still have a little hair.
There was a second mortgage on it for more than the first. So we wanted to get a word in edgewise. They had the opening bid for what the hospital was owed. He bid $50 more and nobody else said anything, so he had a house. And I had never seen it. So we worked on it for 4.5 years and did 95% of the restoration ourselves. Of course, we've still been working on it for another 30 years and continuing to make it a lot better.
I came here with dark hair, but now I got gray hair. But I spent a year of my life underneath the mansion, putting in plumbing and electric wires and everything like that. And I went under dark-headed, and I came out looking like this. And I'm not kidding you, that's true. My hair went from dark to light. Over a year I spent underneath this mansion here. I tell people, anything that doesn't look good or wasn't done well here, my wife did it. There was not an evergreen here on this property when I started this. And so I decided, well, it needs some evergreens. This tree right here we're sitting under right here wasn't here. None of this stuff was here. Actually, none of it. The hedge wasn't here. There are hundreds of hollies around the mansion, and I watered them for 1 solid year, all the hollies around the hedge. We're still working on it, and as you can tell, it's working on me too.
Now that we know that George and Charlene's marriage is more or less safe, we can look at what makes the home unique and what made George buy the Queen Anne estate on such a whim. Clay Faulkner made sure the mansion had numerous features that most people today would consider commonplace. Some examples include closets, indoor plumbing, air conditioning, electricity, hardwood floors, and a brick exterior. You might not think twice about any of that today, but back then it was completely a different story. For example, most Tennesseans did not have regular access to electricity until the 1930s. Air conditioning wasn't a common commodity until even later than that. Of course, more luxurious elements like grand staircases, marble fireplaces, and custom-made woodworking transcended Falcon Rest Mansion from a home with modern conveniences to an estate of utmost opulence. But there's still a lot more to uncover. Let's see what Charlien has to say about the mansion's other features.
It was very much like it is now. The walls inside and outside are solid brick. Very obvious what the floor plan was. If it goes all the way down to the bedrock, inside or out, that's original. The woodwork is mostly original. Some of it had to be reproduced, but we have the majority of that. When they lived here, the woodwork was stained, and there was wallpaper on most of the rooms. Almost all of the wallpaper was gone when we got here. The doctor painted the woodwork hospital green. So the folks who started working on it in '83 had started painting the woodwork period color, and we just followed suit on the many rooms that they had not done. They had finished 3 rooms when we got here. The mansion was originally natural brick. The doctor painted it white to look like a hospital, so he toned the white down with the gray. But in the back, the breezeways had been enclosed by the hospital as inside hallways. And the doctor put plaster on the walls that was more like concrete. The only way my husband could get that off was to chip it off with a hammer and chisel that much at a time. It took him 14 days to do it. When he did, it revealed the original brick like the whole mansion was. And the preservation people said there's penciling between the brick, white lines put between the bricks to define them. That was done with chalk dust, and then they had black penciling, which I said was even more rare. So I said, don't paint over the penciling. So if you look at the breezeway, you know what the original brick looked like. The original kitchen was not attached because it had a coal-burning stove, so it was separated from the main building to keep it cooler and for fire safety. Next to the kitchen, there was a pantry, and then across the breezeway, there was a smokehouse. They had indoor plumbing. There was a reservoir across the road that provided pressurized running water not only for the mansion, but as a fire protection system for the mill village. They had electric lights that were powered by a generator at the dam for the mill. The machinery in the mill across the road was powered by a dam across the creek. So they had a generator there where they made their own electricity for the lights in the mill and in the mansion. They had central steam heat. There was a boiler in the basement that brought steam through pipes in the walls to radiators in all the rooms. And then they had a spring water system where they did pipe that cool spring water from the other side of the creek, under the creek bed, underground to the spring house for refrigeration, and then under the mansion as a primitive form of air conditioning. There's an article on the front page of the Southern Standard in December of 1896 that said it would have all the modern conveniences and improvements of a model city residence. And that's why PBS compared it to that other little place they're building in North Carolina called the Biltmore. The mansion is entered from a huge foyer with a staircase that has stairs with 6-inch risers. Makes it really easy for our senior tour groups to climb the stairs. To the right, there was a parlor with a huge spindle frieze spanning the whole ceiling as a unique decorative element. Mr. Faulkner's room was behind the parlor. Mrs. Faulkner's bedroom was across the hall. We figure that's because Clay's daddy, Asa Faulkner, over a 40-year period of time, fathered 19 children. Clay and Mary only had 5, so I don't know if the separate bedrooms had anything to do with that or not. Next to Mary's room, there was a morning room or family room where they would gather most often for devotional and just to be together as a family. It has 6 doors in it, 2 windows and a mantel, so it was definitely the passageway for the whole house. Their dining room was where the kitchen for the Falcon Rest Mansion is now. When we did the restoration, we put a modern, very serviceable, but old-fashioned looking kitchen dining room was because we didn't want to go across the breezeway to the kitchen. And we used the hospital nurses station to hide our very modern generic range. Upstairs were the children's bedrooms. There were 4 bedrooms that opened onto the upstairs sitting room, which is some of the most beautiful architecture in the building. It has these 3 arched windows that look out over the grounds. It was a children's playroom and schoolroom. They did have closets. It is unusual to see closets in a place this age. A lot of places they tax houses according to the number of rooms they had. Closets sometimes counted as a room. People never like to pay taxes. We figured the Faulkners just said we're rich enough to pay it, or maybe they found a loophole that said if it didn't go all the way to the ceiling, it didn't count, but they are original. We had the original main electric breaker that was in the mansion when they were here. It had the knob and tube wiring. But now people ask us, is there anything you found in the walls? No, all of the walls are solid brick, inside and out. One of the doctors from the hospital visited right after we opened, and he brought us a Confederate $20 bill. He said Dr. Dietrich had 2 of them in the wall, under the wallpaper, I suppose, in the mansion. And Dr. Dietrich kept one, he kept the other, and he gave it to us. And we thought, well, why would people put money in the wall? Somebody said it's for good luck. But of course, Confederate money was not negotiable in 1897, so I figured Clay wanted the luck, but he didn't want to waste the money, so he used the Confederate money instead.
Visitors often praise Falcon Rest's ability to demonstrate how social elite lived over a century ago, but the mansion also has a strange ability to make you feel right at home. Charlien talks to us about how she and George helped encapsulate the experience of being transported back to the turn of the century.
When the hospital was here, they had built an ugly concrete block building behind the mansion as a laundry room, cannery, and milk processing plant for the hospital. They were Seventh-day Adventists, so they didn't eat meat, they didn't drink caffeine, and they didn't give any to their patients, even though most of them were Baptist and Church of Christ. When we got it, we started getting all these church and senior groups wanting to come and tour, and then they wanted to eat. So we started out serving them on the veranda, but that only works, in good weather. So we decided to go ahead and redo the building out back that the doctor had built, add on to it and redo it. My husband designed the courtyard about 20 years ago to give us a private place outside for events like weddings. Of course, now the holly hedge surrounds the whole original part of the property that we bought in 1989, so it makes the whole thing private. It's like you leave the 21st century, you go through the secret entrance into the hedge, and you enter the 1890s. Mr. Faulkner named his mansion Falcon Rest. I think it's very appropriately named because people always say it seems so restful and peaceful here. And it's very elegant, but it's not garish like a lot of things from the period were. It's a friendly elegance. It just kind of draws people in, makes them want to sit on the veranda and rock. And even though it's fancy, it feels like home.
Falcon Rest continues to attract visitors from all over the country, and hopefully you can see why. When you walk through the gardens and over the threshold, you will feel right at home in the late 1800s. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Where Stories Live. If you like this program, please visit our website and stay tuned for our next episode where we will go where stories live.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.